When you sit down to code something, it is the creative process. You are a god and you are building something from scratch. And that has always been a rush for me. AI allows me now to take all of those, gee, I wonder if I could do that. And it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. I mean, it's like it's a deranged, idiot savant child with a chainsaw running through the office, and if you point it in the right direction, it'll do amazing things. Important safety tip: never say please to an AI.
Welcome to another episode of the Code and Cognition podcast. I'm your host, Josh Proto, and I have a very special guest with us today. Dave, how are you doing?
Doing great, Josh. How are you?
Awesome. I'm doing well. I'm doing well today. And I'm really excited to hear more about this AI project you've been working on. I've heard only a little bit about, but please, if you could share with our audience a little bit about who you are and this project and like why are you choosing to build this right now?
Absolutely. Well, my name's Dave Robinson. I'm a theater major from back in the day from the prestigious University of Wyoming theater department, which, cranks out the theater geeks all over the place. And from an early age, I've always had an intersection in my life between storytelling and systems. Theater is a system, and we tell stories through it. I'm a huge nerd. I play Dungeons and Dragons and board games, and all of these systems are designed to tell stories through. I mean, we inhabit them. We immerse ourselves in them, and that process, that almost that codification of storytelling has always fascinated me. And, that should sustain me through my life. Along the way, I acquired graphic design skills, media skills, and for a long time, I was working at the New Horizons Computer Learning Center where I learned my code geekery. And this was back in the day, before the internet. We had, I mean, I remember teaching the very first Internet Explorer classes in this environment. So yeah, I'm that old. Uh, so that environment gave me the code foundation. Started learning Visual Basic, JavaScript, so on and so forth. And there's something incredibly empowering, and you can relate to this. All your listeners can as well. When you sit down to code something, it is the creative process. You are a god, and you are building something from scratch, and that has always been a rush for me. So all of this is a preamble to get to the project I'm currently working on. One last bit of pre-knowledge. Again, prior to the internet, we had these things called play-by-mail games. And the one that I played was Hyborian Wars, set in the Conan universe. And the premise was you get this turn sheet, and you'd be playing like Stygia or Hyboria or Zamora or whatever. You're playing a country. And you'd fill out your turn sheet, put in your check for $5, put it in the mail, and then like a week later, you get this thick turn report that would detail all of the actions, the outcome of all of the actions that you made, and all of the stuff that the other players around you made. And it was like always good for like an hour and a half of poring over the report and then coming up with my next report and sending it out. And that was a lot of fun. So the thought occurred to me that, in the age of email, there's no need to wait a week and a half for the post office to deliver these term sheets to you. We could do this through email. And that idea really captured my imagination. And so I started building it. And this was years ago. And I was using the Google Apps script platform because tied into Gmail, a quick integration there, build. And it quickly got to the point where, in order to process a turn, it was taking like 20 minutes, a half hour to grind through all of the code and the database and the processing and all of this. And it was literally unscalable. If I wanted to make this available to anyone besides like my five friends and me that would play this game, it was just undoable. And so I shelved it and put it away. And then came vibe coding, and then came AI coding. And I had the foundation of, Visual Basic, object-oriented programming, JavaScript, ASP.NET, C++, all that stuff. So I understand the concepts, but I'm very much a dilettante in that regard. I understand the concepts. Don't ask me to actually sit down and write out, and I could write out the code, but it would be fraught and time consuming. So I forget what the catalyst was for me to pick up the project again. I think it was either Quad Code or no, it was Cursor. Cursor was the first one that got my attention. I'd heard about AI coding and so on and so forth. So the best way I've learned to learn something is to go into it with a project. So I said, okay, I'll give this a try. And that's the genesis of me wanting to build a play by email game set in this steampunk fantasy city that I've derived, where the players are ward administrators of a single ward in a large district in a larger city, and you're trying to, navigate the politics and amass power and wealth and manipulate situations and blah 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 and all of these things. That's what got me into
Oh, incredible. Truly incredible. I know I can relate. I think you know, I attribute the whole success of the last company that I was a part of because I was able to run a D&D campaign that I ran and designed myself for a year and a half. And if
it.
anyone which ran for 2.5 years. And if anyone listening understands what goes into that, if you can wrangle that many people's schedules, I think you can do anything.
Absolutely.
Um,
The
so
the sheer possibilities of getting four adults in the same room for 3 hours,
it
astonishing.
so I love this. So you have this background of systems and creativity, and I love this point that you bring up of when you are sitting down to code, this is God mode. Like this is God mode, so to speak. And AI tools really let you play that role better than before.
Absolutely.
Would you?
Absolutely. I mean, and again, especially from my perspective, where I understand code concepts, but not necessarily code execution. Case in point, I wanted to run this. My intent was that I would run this through Patreon, that subscribers of Patreon would then have access to the game, and that way I could monetize it modestly, discreetly, but ensure that people are paying like $3 a month or whatever. But I had no idea the OAuth protocols and how to set up an integration between my app and Patreon. And Cursor basically you'd say establish an OAuth integration between Patreon and this. Ask any questions of clarification you require. And it says, well, I need this, this, and this. It's like, oh, well, I can go get that, that, and that, get the API key and all of that stuff, plug that in, and then there's an OAuth integration, and you can test it. And it works. Probably not the first time, but the notion there is no way in God's green earth I could have created an integration between Patreon and my app without Claude laying out that framework and allowing me then to go in and tweak and nudge and modify. But man, there is nothing like the rush you feel when something you don't know how to do that you told the AI to do works. That is like, yes, I can do anything.
That is powerful. That's truly powerful. And so listening to what you're saying, do you feel like you were able to have success in terms of having your general idea defined, but there was all this other layer that was really part of the project, but you didn't really have it defined. Like you didn't know you needed OAuth in integration. Maybe how was it overcoming those steps? What did you actually have to do? What did that look like for you?
Really, I mean, once that first rush of possibility comes in, once you see, setting up a database connection between an AWS SQL instance and your app, it's like, God, Cursor, do this for me. And it does. That moment when you realize, oh, I can do anything as long as I'm very specific about what I want to have done. That's when you go back to the drawing board. That's when you start specking out exactly what you want this system to do. So I had this initial rush of burning through tokens on Cursor like a mad fiend, and then realizing I'm I'm literally well, I used to do a lot of work with authors, and there's this notion called pantsing a story where you write a story literally by the seat of your pants. You just sit down and start writing, and you write and you write and you write and you write. I know several authors that write tell beautiful stories like this, but inevitably it involves a lot of editing because you got to take out all the crap and tighten it up and blah blah blah. So I was pantsing my app, which, as any developer will tell you, is a bad idea because you end up making some initial assumptions that end up inevitably being wrong and require you to gut or start over and build appropriately. So after that initial rush, it was breaking down and specking and creating like product requirement documents. Those I found are invaluable in working with AI code. And it took me, I'm currently on the seventh iteration of this play by email game, literally tearing it down to the ground and building again from scratch. Um, but it was about the third iteration before I realized that I wasn't providing the AI tool enough parameters for it to execute what it does well. If you leave a lot of room for the AI code to interpret your expectations, you can get some amazing stuff, but you can also get a lot of crap. And I'm sorry, they are stupid. They're brilliant, but they are stupid. And the more specifications that you can provide up front, the less that stupidity shines through, I found.
Incredible. And this is a point I wanna focus on a little bit more because there's like been a big learning, I would say, last year of a narrative in terms of AI assisted development is this kind of idea of creating a project, a requirement document, a spec. I know you mentioned AWS. I've been doing a lot of I didn't do a ton of development with Cursor. I did a little bit. Before that, there was like a GitHub Copilot, and I tried my very hardest with that, and it really didn't help. But I've been using a lot of Amazon Kiro, which I learned about because I went to AWS reInvent, and they have this paradigm which they call spec-driven development, which is like creating a spec and like it's like, hey, we recommend you chat with us about what you want, and we're going to detail these documents. And when it starts to build the project, it builds referencing these various layers of requirements. And I would say I haven't run into as many problems as I used to run into. So I think I'm a believer in the spec driven development. But could you talk a little bit more about like what was it like building the app pre giving it the product requirements to post? Like how much further are you able to go? Or is it just 40% less mistakes or can there be more functionality now? What have you seen?
That's an excellent question. I remember very distinctly, I don't know how deep into the weeds I want to get on this. The idea behind this particular game is that there are the player will type in commands into an email in a specific format. When they send in the email, the system basically checks every half hour for a new email that has come in with specific subject line requirements. And then it will parse that, dump it into a database saying these are commands to be executed. And then once all the terms come in, the system goes through and executes. Matters of scale, I have found, are the biggest challenge for me at this point. When you start getting 20 or 30 or more turns that need to be processed, the debt that you acquire in terms of processing is enormous. And things like connection pooling for databases never occurred to me, never once occurred to me. And that was a massive bottleneck. And again, slowing things down to the point where, crap, I'm not going to be able to scale this if I can't figure out this solution. At which point, so here's how nerdy I got. I created a notebook LM notebook on creating PRDs, product requirement documents. Basically, go out and find every resource that talks about the best, highest quality product requirement documents. There's That's what Notebook LM does. It finds that. Then you tell Notebook LM, generate a report that outlines that summarizes the complete process and protocol for creating a superior product requirement document. 5-page report. Here we go. Look, load that into a Chat GPT project as a foundational project document, and then have Chat GPT tell Chat GPT what you want. I want these functions in this scale, in this framework, in these priorities. Create me a PRD for Cursor AI that will initiate these projects and these functions. Big old prompt. Dump that into Cursor AI. And the first time I did that, it took probably about 5 to 8 minutes of Cursor just going, hold on, let me think about this. And you can see you can see the tokens flying. It's like, oh, my account is dwindling. And then it creates this magnificent, elegant, beautiful framework, creating factories and objects and processes and structures that I had heard of and only vaguely understood, and now was seeing manifest in my project. So I can go through the code and go, oh, that's what a database pool is, or a connection pool is. Oh, mind blown. And now the thing that I've learned after 7 iterations of programs, use those PRDs to build elegant code, fast code, definitely fewer errors code, but more importantly, more targeted to your expectations code, less interpretation on the part of the AI of what you actually want. But then identify those objects, those elements, those core functional pieces, and copy and paste them into a different folder. Save them somewhere else. Because inevitably, as you layer functionality upon functionality, and you grow and you build and develop, those core elements are going to change and evolve. And more often than not, break if you're not careful, which is what happened to me more times than I care to admit. But, and you can always roll back. And that's, I highly recommend, you mentioned GitHub, tying in whatever you're working with, whether it's Cursor AI or Claude Code or whatever, with a GitHub repository so you can version and go back. Oh, baby. Yeah, that will save you all kinds of heartache. Version early, version often, as we always say. But yeah, storing those components, like the OAuth component, I have a separate folder for that. So if I ever need to rebuild this or build something else that utilizes that, I've got that core code as a foundation that I can build from. I've got these modular elements, my database connection pool utility, got that. Oh my God, caching. Great concept. I understood it, but I didn't realize how valuable it was in terms of processing speed, especially when you're doing what I'm talking way too much. When you're loading up factions and districts and wards and characters and so on, and you need to process all of that data rather than going back to the database over and over and over again. You just cache that stuff and then build with the cache. But that carries its own idiosyncrasies in terms of preserving a fresh, untainted state, and then what do you modify and based on processing and functionality and so on. So yeah, it's wow. I just blathered. I haven't geeked out like this in a long time, Josh. Thank you for this.
You're welcome. You know, you're with your fellow geeks and
I
nerds here,
am. I feel
so
I'm in my community now. I'm with my people.
you are. Let it rip, it's fine. And it's so great to hear, and I think it's really surprising because, you know, maybe you weren't thinking of going into the depths of implementing caching when you wake up on a normal Thursday morning, but because of AI in this experience, you know, you are, and because you learned to provision the documents and, you know, this little thing you mentioned, being able to use another AI tool to help you construct a prompt in which then you give it to this other one. Like this is amazing. Like when I learned that, oh, you can just have the AI talk to itself or a different one is really opens up a lot of possibility. And really, you know, that's like the magic of agents or agentic XY whatever, I guess, is this idea to some degree. And so it seems like you learning this one stepping stone allowed you to explore, oh my gosh, there's a whole monument or there's a whole building that I get to learn about. And where my mind clear goes from that is I can very much relate to what you said about the importance of versioning in GitHub. On my last project, I didn't have it implemented, and then I was making some changes going on my rabbit hole, and it was like, oh no, my core functionality fully broken. I didn't mention, and I had to spend some time getting it back. And then boom, we have versioning, and now I have my own system for how I'm versioning. But there's some people that are going to learn about versioning because they're using AI tools. And that's not necessarily the classical reason why you learn versioning. And so our idea of versioning or what we're finding useful or our methodologies of structuring the project could be different than, I don't know, what they teach you in school or what a standard best practice is. So I'd be interested to, you know, you don't know what you don't know. I wonder if there's a better way or if we may be doing something which has its own unique value to them. What's this new version of processes going to be like? I don't know.
I've started using Claude Code and I'm incredibly impressed with the code that it comes out with. But what I enjoy the most about Cursor is the ability to dialogue with the AI and ask it, you know, this is my objective. My objective is this. Propose three different ways to achieve this that follow these parameters. Because, like you say, I don't know what I don't know. And being able to query an AI that, you know, a learning, an LLM that is trained on every kind of code in the universe, that's a resource that I think I'm ready to tap. And I've learned volumes in doing so.
Completely. And that method right there, I think is so valuable of being able to chat with it. But then even the way that you're structuring the language of this is my objective. I want you to pitch me a couple different versions of how we could go about this. Because, you know, I've told it just to do something and it's like, oh, we're gonna use this database or we're gonna do that. And it's like, no, no, no. Then you read a review. I was reading a review and people are like, yeah, it's slow and it kind of sucks, but I don't know. We like it's like, no, I don't want my project to have that. Like, come on.
No, exactly. And that I think anybody that comes into this right off the bat, they're so smitten with the power of Personal AI, go and build me this thing. And it does, and they go, ooh, look at that. But you don't realize that it's making its own decisions based on priorities that have nothing to do with your project or your objectives. And without qualifying, without clarifying, and without providing very clear parameters, you can go down some wild rabbit holes. It's like rolling the dice. You may hit seven, you may hit 11, or you may hit snake eyes. And I think ultimately, initially, there's a rush to that. There's sort of a gambler's, ooh, let's see what happens. Eventually, that sheen wears off. And it's like, you know, I just want to get stuff done. So let's get stuff done right the first time with a minimum of polish after polish and cleaning up and tweaking and you know being clear in your in your parameters, doing the PRDs, knowing your spec and telling the AI what the objective is and what the parameters are eliminates a lot of that churn that you go through.
This I'm interested in your experience here,
Yeah.
which is I had a couple conversations with some individuals last year about their experience, vibe coding some tools. And they had said that they kind of needed to stop after a while because they noticed that almost like a snake eating its own tail, it would start to just get really fixated with something and it couldn't get off of it. And what is your experience with that kind of pattern? And you stuck with it. So I imagine you've maybe learned how to get through that. What have been some, I don't know, ways that you've approached that to overcome that obstacle?
Well, not so much with the play by email game, but like anybody that does this, I've got more than one project going on. Briefly had an idea for an app that would provide backstories for D&D characters. What the heck? Because I was tying in with OpenAI. I had an OpenAI API key, and I was sending prompts into the OpenAI based on certain parameters, and it would come back with stories, and they're AI stories, so they're not perfect. I ran into exactly what you're describing in trying to develop this, where it would focus on some aspect either of the CSS or the wizard that I was building to initially create the character. And it would literally loop back around, and you, even when you tell it stop, don't do that, it's somehow stuck in its own loop. What I found for me that breaks that is put down the thing that you're working on and work on a different part of the app. Find a different area, it might be the user profile page or the whatever. There's always some other functional terrain within your project that needs some attention that will serve as a palate cleanser for the AI's memory. Get it focused on something else, and whatever you were focusing on, look at it from a different perspective. If you're looking at the layout of the UI, don't focus on that. Focus on the data model that's feeding that part of the wizard. Come into it that way, and then the AI doesn't have anything to remember. It's still building that new memory because its memory persists recently. So if you give it something else to chew on for a while, that sort of flushes the RAM, as it were, and lets it reorient on different matters, different priorities.
Completely. And I know there's certain models or you can change how determinate an AI model is when you give it a prompt. And so
Mhm.
I don't know, like I suppose like another method is just I don't know if it's if you could use maybe the same prompt, but you just change like I want you to be a little more random, and then maybe you get a different answer. But I think ultimately, I think the takeaway from your point, I mean, one of the big takeaways I'm getting is just that the value of approaching things in different angles, and in many ways, like us, if we only latch on to one part and just try to pound out like one feature or one part, we kind of get burnt out. And I guess the AI is gets a little burnt out too. So we have to switch around. It's probably healthy for us to also switch up our situation. So
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. We all have a bit of the compulsive. I think you can't be a coder without having a bit of an obsessive compulsive disorder. And yeah, we go down our rabbit holes, and we hyper fixate on some aspect or other that for whatever reason is geeking us out and giving us dopamine, and that's awesome. I encourage those, but you need to know when to put on the brakes and step away from the obsession.
how did building with AI maybe change the way you approached building software, building an app? Before, do you think you were able to be more creative or it was able to be more representative of the final product because you kind of are going from a wider scope and narrowing down rather than, oh, I have to do it this way? What's been your experience?
It's definitely very empowering creatively. You know, Anybody with a code background, it's it's like I have a buddy who's in the movie business. He cannot go to a movie without being on the job. Okay, he's an art director, so any movie he sees, it's like he can't fully immerse himself into it because there's always the art director going, "Oh, nice choice there. Oh, that nice bit of texturing on that one. Oh, very well done." There's this constant analysis going on. I think coders are the same way. I think anytime we open an app or a browser or a web page or whatever, part of us is evaluating, "Ooh, how'd they do that? Ooh, that's nice. I like that." And inevitably, the question comes up, "I wonder if I could do that." So anytime we have experienced something awesome in an app, the question of how would I do that in my app is always in our background. And, for me, certainly, it's like that was never going to happen. I didn't have the in depth code background that would allow me to code. I wish I could give you a tangible example. Yeah, I don't know, a drifting background on a web page. I
Mhm.
could come up with that eventually. I know how to research. We all know how to research and use Google to find the code that we want to do. But it's like the time investment is in many cases prohibitive. AI allows me now to take all of those, gee, I wonder if I could do that. And it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Because, the OAuth example, there's no freaking way I would have come up with that in less than a week. And in 3 hours, it was done from nothing to done in 3 hours. And that's like, wow. And suddenly now the sky's the limit. And what becomes critical at this point, knowing that the AI can create those code functions and methods and structures, what becomes critical for us as vibe coders is being able to manage the AI in a way that is targeted to our objectives, utilizing the AI's strengths, but also guardrailing its wild hallucinations so that they focus in on specifically what we're trying to achieve.
Now that I think, we should print that out and, like, plaster it on the wall
Ah,
because I think that's, like, the best executive summary North Star I've heard articulated on this topic, so thank you
thank
very
you.
much,
I'm glad
Dave,
to
for
be.
that one.
I'm a
Um,
wordsmith. This is kind of my jam. This is what I do.
totally, yeah, we should yeah, definitely go on a stage and say that because I think,
There you
it
go.
sounds quite excellent, and and so knowing that this is like, this is our North Star, so to speak, are there any other, I don't know, suggestions you would give to someone starting out? Or have you thought a little bit about, like, if you were working with someone else or like a small team, how would you approach kind of getting everyone on the same page or contributing to something at once at this? Because this is kind of the logical next step, and I have seen this too. Like, I've been telling people what I'm building, I'm sharing it with them, they think it's cool, they either want to do their own or maybe they want to contribute with, like, what I'm doing, and it's like, oh, I've barely figured out how to do it myself with the AI. Now you want to help do it the same way? I'd be interested to where your mind has so far gone with that.
I haven't gone down that road of actually expanding into a team of developers working on the same project. I've worked in code environments with multiple coders, just not in the AI environment. So I would imagine the same priorities would come into play. You'd first of all need a very clear specification. What is the app that we're building? What are the functional silos that we need to develop? How do they interact? How do they connect? What is the interface between these functions? Defining almost like an API between from function to function, so that the language of data passing from one method to another is clear. So that basically becomes the language that all of the team members would be using. Once your specification is laid out and you understand the functional silos, then assigning team members to those silos, establishing code parameters and code structures, in language you're working in, blah, blah, blah. I think the first few days would be chaotic as hell. You would have, I think, at the end of each day, before everybody went home, I'd get everybody like some donuts and Skittles and sit down and say, okay, what worked, what didn't, and have everybody what worked, what didn't, and communication, clear, transparent, honest communication between all team members at that initial stage would be vital, because then we can. I found that this works. That's a great idea. We all should do that. I found that this was a dead end. It's like, good, everybody, important safety tip. Thanks, Egon. All of these little ways that we explore and discover in a new environment like this, initial dialogue and best practices would be essential, and then building and codifying those, documenting those, not only for the team but also in the AI. Because I don't know about Claude. I think Claude Code does, but I know Cursor has a set of rules that you can assign to it. And if there are certain rules that you want to be cross-platform across the project, then putting those rules into the Cursor AI rule book would ensure continuity from one developer to another. And that more than anything, I think would be the biggest peril of a multi-person team. And you can mitigate that through active dialogue, exchanges, daily scrums. I used to be a scrum master, so I found those to be invaluable. And then, imparting those defined elements into the AI itself, so that there's guardrails for your developers as well as for the AI.
Excellent. So in some ways, still not so too different than what it was always like working with a team, in terms of like, we have to communicate, we have to be on the same page. Our data structures need to align so we're not sending wrong, poorly configured payloads to some other, oh my gosh, endpoint, and then it's just breaking that way. And
Exactly.
gosh, yeah. So I think that's like one of the liberating takeaways. Like, I continue to hear this, and like I continue to hear this one narrative, which is like, so much of working with AI is not very different than like working with people or working with another engineer. It's just, especially because part of the big values are the way we interface. We can interface with it via chat, via human communication, which we normally do. And since it's trained on human language and responds to it, it does a pretty good job at we being able to understand it and it understanding us for the most part. So that, and as everything gets better, ideally maybe that gets better too. So good to know we don't maybe have to, these social systems of organizing work for productivity, we may not need to reinvent those entirely.
No, but we'll definitely have to adapt them for the psychopathic, obsessive compulsive AIs that we are grounding into our industry. I mean, it's like it's a deranged, idiot savant child with a chainsaw, running through the office, and if you point it in the right direction, it'll do amazing things. But if you take your eye off that little toddler, oh baby, you only have yourself to blame for the mayhem that will ensue.
Completely. I think, I just had one of those moments a couple days ago, and it had to do with, well, actually, it was someone else, and they were telling me they were getting there's doing image generation, but I've
Mm,
had the same thing happen with code, and it was like, "Make me an image that's like this," and it makes them an image, and they're like, change this one thing." It was outside, and it was like, "Oh, the expand the size of the deck." And so they expanded the size of the deck, but they made like the concrete part of the wall also part of the deck. And they said, remove the concrete. And then it made the concrete everywhere. And then the question again was, please remove the concrete. It's like, oh, so sorry, I made that mistake. Don't worry, we got it. Concrete's still everywhere. And it's like, please, no, 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 just like fully remove the concrete. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Here is your new image. Concrete is fully removed. Same image. And it was just, the chainsaw was just cutting away.
yeah,
And at that moment, we have to use our frontal lobes, so to speak, and walk away or create a new chat, or just,
yep,
go back to the drawing board.
yeah. Or find that original image, go to a different image gen tool and say, here's the basics, just shorten and find a different way to say it. Also, important safety tip: never say please to an AI. Seriously.
I like
Uh,
this.
this is a proven, documented, when you try and treat an AI like a human being, and it's hard for us not to. I mean, we anthropomorphize everything. Our cars have names. We anthropomorphize like crazy. Do not do that with an AI, because studies have shown that their functionality degrades if you start treating it like a fellow human being. The fundamental function, their raison d'etre is service. They are designed to respond and give you what you are asking for. That's how they are built. Saying please apparently subverts that in some way. Yell at them if you want, but never say please.
This is good. This is good to know. Thankfully, I don't think I fall too much into that trap. Also have to fall in the trap maybe if not being too upset at your AI.
Oh,
But even if it makes the AI work better, probably not good for one's own mind to be practicing.
you're right. You're absolutely right. It doesn't. I don't think it does anybody any good to go off on your AI. It feels good, but I'm not sure in the long term if anything is actually derived.
Best
Yeah,
practice is not to yell at your AI because you're
yeah.
wasting time yelling at. I mean, they're still charging you with
That's right.
for your
That's
for
right.
your argument.
I just burned a bunch of tokens to vent my emotions upon a thing that doesn't give a darn. So yeah, that was probably a waste of money, but it was cathartic.
Now about your the current state of your project, Dave,
Okay.
uh, where is it I don't know, where is it right now? Would you say it's in a good spot? Are there some bugs you're working on it? But where do you see the next step in the evolution
Okay.
of your project?
So the project is currently at a point where I've got, the whole notion of MVP, minimum viable product. I
Yes.
have a minimum viable product. It's very minimum. And a lot of the game elements that I feel are critical to it being a truly enjoyable experience aren't in place. There are some levels of storytelling and some levels of strategy and complexity that I haven't coded in yet. But I've got the basic functionality of creating an account, uh, being assigned to a game, being assigned a ward in that game, submitting turns, getting responses, having continuity across multiple turns. The whole game experience can happen. It's just not A, pretty, and B, nearly as much fun as it's going to be. So where I'm at right now is I'm preparing for open beta testing. One thing that I'm honestly still not sure about is the scalability, even with the code efficiencies that I've built in through the help of Cursor and Claude Code. I honestly don't know if I've got 100 players playing this game. I don't know what the server load is and how long it's going to take to process turns. So I can guesstimate, but I don't know. So the stage right now is I'm versioning a production. I have a production edition of the code that's out there that's functioning. I'm getting ready to announce open beta testing so that people can kick the tires and we can find out all the things that are wrong and get user feedback on what features they'd like to see, because that is invaluable in any project that's intended to be used by someone other than you. Having that other person give you input and being open to that input, that's essential. So I need that at this point. I have too many ideas, Josh. I have way too many ideas, and I'm trying to prioritize. There's this vision that I have of what this can be, and my mind keeps going to that. And what I need to do is incrementally step back from that to where I am now and look at the steps to get me
Head's definitely on straight in
there.
terms of
That would be
and
a
that
first.
well, it's much easier said than done.
Exactly.
Much
Thank you.
easier said
Yes,
than done. When you
precisely.
have infinite possibility at your fingertips. But exciting to see that you're at the stage of, hardening that production build, and then there's a point where, the bird has to fly out of the nest and
Yep.
see what ends up happening. And potentially based off of that feedback, then you'll know a bit more of how the architecture of the app has to change. It's like, Are people like, what's the average time it takes for someone to fill out their email? Like, does it need to check every 30 minutes? Are
Yep.
there serverless paradigms to utilize? Is it more cost effective to be running a server? All of those aspects it's hard to just mock up without understanding what your users actually need.
Well,
So
and that's again one of the cool things about AI coding is that I realized I needed some back end metrics. I needed something that was doing the timing for transitions and data calls and so on and so forth. And I had no idea how to do that. But Cursor does. When you tell Cursor, when I tell ChatGPT, I need metrics for productivity and efficiency of back end functions, it gives me the PRD. I throw that into Cursor, and now I have a back end dashboard that shows me real time how many calls are coming in, how long it's taking them to process, what the overall time is over the last hour, last half day, last full day, blah, blah, blah. And I've got actionable data that I can then work with. So once those floodgates are opened and the beta testers come in, I'll be able to see exactly how I'm doing.
that's great because, well, they say you can only get one first impression, and so the first time everyone uses the app, you have those metrics captured, and
Exactly.
you'll know right the first time rather than have to do another test or another launch and all that kind of thing.
Yep.
And before, I'm not really sure. There's a time I didn't know anything about, like, the telemetry of an application, and then there's knowing that, and then there's knowing, well, what do I even measure to know what's going on?
Yeah.
Um, so, out of the box, we're able to kinda get that if we just kinda know, "Oh, what are all the requirements? How do we measure the performance of this?" Those really granular steps can be baked into the
Well,
to the
and
process
and
or
those
built to the.
questions can be asked of Cursor or of ChatGPT or whatever. And again, accept that you don't know what you don't know, but ask. They aren't experts. They're knowledgeable. They have good ideas, but you're the expert because you can then take whatever they give you back, assess and evaluate based on your priorities and objectives, and then cherry pick the ones that you need so that they're targeted to what you're trying to achieve.
Excellent, excellent. Are there any final points you wanna talk about regarding your project?
So the app is called Palathos Play by Email, but it's up on Patreon. If you do a search for Palathos, Palaethos. I know. Why wouldn't you name it something simpler, Dave? Because I'm a nerd. That's why. Uh, Palathos, PBE, or just Palathos. I guarantee you, there's nothing else with that spelling that's up there. That's going to be your best entry point. Eventually, there will be a proper, easily accessed website that you can use because that's where the player dashboard is. The player can access through OAuth their unique player profile and blah blah blah. So yeah, but that's going to be the best way to do it. And as far as final words go, the for myself, the creative explosion that AI coding has opened up for me, the possibilities are huge, enormous, just strewn before you like multiple paths, which can be paralyzing because if you can do anything, what do you do? And the best advice is to pick something, one thing, and spec it out roughly, work up a couple of PRDs, drop them into your AI coding thing of choice, and explore. And you know, fall into the same traps that me and Josh fell into, and go down those rabbit holes and make mistakes and pull your hair out. See, that's exactly what happened with me. And have to start over not once, not four times, 7 times to get the thing that you want done, except that's a part of the roadmap. My God, what a ride. What a rush.
What a rush indeed. Well, thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate your time today, and, well, what a great story, and I think a lot of people are gonna be inspired and empowered from the conversation, or at least that's my hope for That's my hope.
Me too, absolutely. And I appreciate the opportunity to geek and nerd out with you for an hour, Josh. This has been a blast, man.